Speaker recognizes the honourable member from Mount Pearl North.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Glad to have a chance to rise and speak once again to this budget, a budget that's very much last year's budget. So we've heard a couple of Liberal MHAs today talk about how great the budget is and can't understand why we're talking about things that happened in 2016. Well, the 2017 budget is simply a continuation of what we saw in 2016. Of the 300 new taxes and fees, 299 and a half of them continue to exist. The cuts we saw to the adult dental program continue. The cuts we saw to home care hours continue. The cuts we saw to the prescription drug program continue. And that's just a few examples from the Department of Health. So there's reason to discuss some of those issues further, because those same issues are going to impact people even further this year as a result of the path that we're now on. But I'd like to talk more about, I will talk about the budget, but I want to focus in particularly on the economy. And I'd like to talk about the announcement that I had an opportunity to sit in on this morning, where the Premier and a number of ministers and MHAs gathered with representatives, well-respected representatives from a number of industries, to talk about the big new plan. So over a year and a half into their mandate, they're almost halfway through their mandate, and the Liberal government is now going to start talking about jobs. Well, better late than never, I suppose. But the projections in their own budget documents show that there will be many more job losses on their watch in this year and in subsequent years as well. But today's announcement was simply an announcement that we're going to consult industry, we're going to hold some more consultations, and we're going to work with industry to come up with a plan that will create jobs. Well, I think the time for that has come and gone, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about a government that's approaching the halfway mark in its mandate, and now they want to start talking about jobs in the economy. They're going to finally start talking to industry about how to support economic growth. It's too little too late, but at the same time, I suppose better late than never. The two industries that we're primarily focused on today were aquaculture and agriculture. So I'd like to comment a little bit on both of them. Those are industries that, as a party, as a caucus, we fully support. In fact, during the previous PC administration, there were great strides made in both areas. But I'll be the first to say, definitely more work to do, as there always is. We heard talk this morning about food self-sufficiency, which is a good goal. And something that we need to talk more about. And I think the recent decision by government to free up some more Crown land for agricultural development is actually a good decision, and one that I'm happy to stand and support. But today, while the President of the Federation of Agriculture was there and a representative from Food First NL, both great organizations doing excellent work to advance food security, with them sitting there by the Premier, there was no news of anything new. There was not one concrete idea, not one specific target, not one specific recommendation, just a commitment to work together and do some more consultation and come up with a plan. Well, when you're halfway through your mandate, when you've made decisions that have ground the economy to a halt, it's a little bit disingenuous, perhaps, to now all of a sudden say, well, we're going to start listening, we're going to start consulting. All we've heard from this government is consultation. So we need some bold targets when it comes to food self-sufficiency, and we need some action. So let me just remind you of some of the commitments that during the last campaign we talked about. Now, I had a very brief opportunity, it's probably 6 or 7 years ago now, to work as the parliamentary secretary to the minister that was responsible for the former Forestry and Agri-Foods Agency. And some of the challenges that we were tackling through our work in the agri-food sector continue to be challenges, but I think there's been some progress made. The availability of land was one issue that was being worked on. There was more land made available, and again, I think this government's recent moves to make even more land available is a step in the right direction. But there are other challenges facing the agricultural sector that we didn't hear anything about this morning because there were no specifics. It's not just about land. Access to capital is a big issue for people that want to get into farming or who are already in farming. And there's a need for, if you want to get serious about tackling this issue, then that's an area where some focus and attention is needed. In addition to that, attracting new entrants to agriculture is a major challenge as well. And while a number of initiatives have been undertaken in recent years to do just that, I think there's more work to be done in order to grow the sector. Another challenge is succession planning. The last time I checked, and my data might be several years old now, Mr. Speaker, but the last time I checked, the average age of our farmers was late 50s, maybe even 60. So it's an aging population, not unlike the demographics of Newfoundland and Labrador overall, or not unlike other sectors in our economy. But for that reason, succession planning for a lot of farmers who are operating businesses in that sector is really, really important. So when I heard there was going to be a news conference to announce new partnerships with industry, specifically agriculture, I thought, well, maybe those are some of the themes that would be addressed. Not a mention of any of that this morning. Just, we're going to hold a summit, we're going to work together, we're going to come up with a plan, no specific targets. So I'll stand with government and say, yes, agriculture is important. Food security should be a priority. Increasing our food supply and food self-sustainability in our province is a good thing to focus on. But we didn't hear anything in terms of specifics this morning. So some of the things that, following our work in some of those areas, that we said in 2015 that we'd be interested in pursuing if we were to continue in government. And I'll quote our leader at the time, who continues as our leader of the opposition, said some of these things. We will drive growth in the agri-food sector, growth to sustain communities and jobs, to advance food security, which right now is unacceptably low, and to supply people with the kinds of healthy, locally grown food that we ought to be eating. Our plan is to set bold targets for food security. We will collaborate with the Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Agriculture, farmers and others throughout our agricultural sector to substantially increase the amount of local food people in this province can access and eat. By 2025, what percentage of the food could be produced locally? Let's aim high. We will pursue this strategy by making it easier for new entrants to get their farms up and running, by protecting and expanding farmland and relaxing Crown land policies for farm use, by removing the restriction on farmers relative to selling timber cleared from the land, by working with farmers to facilitate succession planning to sustain family farming operations, by capitalizing on opportunities to expand primary production of berries, beef, lamb and pork, and harnessing that growth to drive value-added processing, by making it easier to get local produce in the markets, working collaboratively with the Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Agriculture and farmers, we will identify barriers to accessing healthy local food and find solutions. We will bring farmers and others together to strategize on the best way forward for growth. We will identify ways to address issues of transportation, storage, producers' access to local retailers, and so forth. We will promote and invest in local farmers' markets, which showcase locally grown goods and promote a greater understanding of the important role of agriculture in our economy and society. We will promote community gardens, where seniors groups can help us get back to our traditional roots and live healthier lives in this process. And that was actually an initiative our administration strongly promoted to benefit seniors and also young people. In fact, I had teams from the Conservation Corps doing a really innovative community gardens project in my own district over the past couple of years. We'll partner in support of farmers' forums and the Agriculture in the Classroom program so young people can help us lead the way. We will work with organizations and provincial schools to expand programs that ensure all school-age children have daily access to healthy foods. We will invest in Kids Eat Smart to expand the program and strengthen the program's linkages with local food producers. We will also continue to invest in food access for northern and remote communities. So that's a plan. Many elements of that plan were underway, and I'm pleased to see government acting on some of those same issues. The notion of making more land available, they've acted on, so good for them. But many of the other issues that I've already mentioned and that were outlined in that plan weren't touched on today and haven't been touched on in the first half of this government's mandate. So a plan that addressed all of that would have been something that we could get excited about. But a commitment to finally talk to industry and come up with a plan, it's a little late, Mr. Speaker. Similarly, we're excited about aquaculture. We're proud of the tremendous strides we've made in aquaculture in this province over the last 10 or 15 years to bring us to what is now a $300 or $400 million industry annually in our province. And there has been unprecedented growth, and that's because of some of the groundwork that has been laid over a number of years. And in fact, during our time in government, I was only around for 2/3 of it, but during our time in government, we saw a complete turnaround in the Coast of Bays region. And for anybody in this House or otherwise who hasn't had an opportunity to talk about aquaculture with the member for Fortune Bay Cape Lejeune, I'd strongly encourage you to do so. And I know that the Minister of Fisheries is receptive, and he has an interest in aquaculture as well. And I was glad to see aquaculture showcased this morning. But again, we never heard anything specific. So let's look at the Coast of Bays example. Maybe that can be replicated. Maybe that can be further expanded. But we never heard any specifics or any commitments this morning. But the decisions that were made around aquaculture over the last decade have turned the Coast of Bays region around. I've talked to people in that region, in various communities, who say to me, you know what, in this region right now, particularly around the area of St. Albans, but many other communities as well have benefited, anybody who wants a job has a job. That's a pretty powerful statement for people on the ground to make. And it was not that long ago in multiple regions of the province people were making a similar comment. But even today, despite the economic downturn that we're experiencing in this province due to commodity prices and so on, in the Coast of Bays region, there are still people on the ground who would say anybody who wants a job has a job. And I think the industry is valued at about over $200 million annually in that region alone. So it's real, and it's an example of what's possible when you do engage in meaningful partnerships, and you do have a plan, and you do have a strategy, and you commit to it, and you commit resources to it, and you get people working together in a concerted effort to see progress. I mean, this is an industry that had its birth in the 1980s, but it wasn't until around 2003, 2004 that we started to see some real change and some real supports put in place. Just a couple of examples that jump to mind. There was a loan guarantee program that the previous administration created. There were biosecurity wharves put in place. And those tangible actions with a real plan to grow industry made a huge difference. And now we've got a sustainable industry that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars a year and is employing thousands of people. I heard the leader of the NDP say this morning at the same announcement I was at that it's government's role to create jobs. Well, I disagree. I don't believe we're as a government should be in the business of job creation. But government definitely has a responsibility to create the right environment for jobs to be created. And government absolutely has to be focused on job creation, even though it's not government's responsibility to actually create the jobs. By partnering with industry, by having concrete plans to grow industry, government can create the right climate for jobs to be created and for the economy to be grown. And that's what we've seen in aquaculture, particularly in the Coast of Bays region, is a perfect example of that. So I'm happy to see the current government celebrate it, but if you're going to talk about growing aquaculture, if that's going to be a focus of your so-called jobs plan that isn't yet written, then what's next? Hopefully it will be, like agriculture, an effort to build on some of the successes that we've seen over the last number of years. When I've talked to people in the aquaculture industry in the Coast of Bays region, I just mentioned some of the improvements that have been made over the last number of years. I asked, well, what did it look like prior to that? Because the industry didn't just miraculously start in the early 2000s. It was on the go for 15, 20 years before that. And the comment was, during the previous Liberal administration, we're going back a ways now, I realize, so I'll spare you much of a history lesson. The comment was Liberals had us in a state of perpetual study mode. And I fear that's where we're heading again. No real plan, no real vision. So let's talk partnership. Partnership's a good thing. Let's do more consultation, hold some more summits, and at some point we'll come up with a plan. Well, when you're almost halfway through your mandate, Mr. Speaker, that's just not enough. It won't be enough to grow aquaculture in this province, and it won't be enough to grow agriculture, and it won't be enough to grow any more areas of our economy. So we now have a cabinet committee that's going to do more consultation. I think there's only 4 cabinet ministers that didn't make the cut. So it's amazing that with almost halfway through a mandate, they're going to now start to focus on the economy and jobs, but still no real plan. So the Premier talked this morning about economic diversification, which is a term they love to use. And I honestly think it's a worn-out platitude that's used by politicians who don't really have a plan. And that couldn't be any more evident than it is with the current Premier. They talked again this morning about more consultation with stakeholders and with industry. The people of this province are sick and tired of government pretending to be listening. The time for talk is over. It's time for action, and it's time for true leadership. That's what's desperately needed. And as the Elvis Presley song goes, a little less conversation, a little more action, I think that's exactly what is required at this point in time. What we've seen here today with this morning's announcement is a feeble attempt by government to make it appear that they're doing something positive after 18 months of naysaying, after 18 months of the blame game, after 18 months of wayward leadership. This morning, the Premier looked like someone who was running to be Premier. Well, I've got news for him. He's got the job, and it's time for him to show some leadership. What we need is a real plan, an actual plan, a tangible plan, a comprehensive plan, a balanced plan like we've never, ever in our history had before. A plan that weaves together all facets of our economy and the fabric of our society into a complementing framework for moving forward, in good times and in bad times. And we all know so well, there's a lot of industries, virtually all industries, that are cyclical. And that's a real challenge for us. And I don't believe we've ever been properly prepared as a province, no matter who's been in government, to properly weather downturns, because it's not simple. And it can't happen overnight. We've tended to rely on natural resource revenue to an extent greater than any of us would like. But our mines are not going to last forever, and the demand for iron ore is not always going to be constant, and fish are not always going to be abundant in perpetuity. And we'd love for crab and shrimp to renew as fast as we could catch them, but that's not realistic either. And we'd all love to think that oil won't drop below $100 a barrel, but that isn't reality. So we've got to plan differently. And that does require leadership, and it requires some foresight. And the groundwork until the last 18 months or so was certainly being laid to do just that. Now, that said, we've never really sought the maximum return from our rich resources, and we need to think bigger, and we need to think longer term, and it can't be just about the quick buck. We need to really focus on our own self-sufficiency and obviously that of our children and grandchildren. So I believe we've got to take stock of who we are and what we are and where we are, and have a real vision to manage our huge resources in a sustainable, self-sufficient manner for the benefit of not only this generation, but for the generations that are yet to come. But what I saw this morning was another micro shot in the dark, and it's further evidence that we've got a government with no plan, no vision, and they're simply concerned about pretending to do something in the second half of their mandate. I believe we can do better, and I believe we can be better, and I believe we deserve better. And when I look at industries like aquaculture and agriculture, as I've outlined, there actually is a better way. What I outlined earlier in my remarks are some concrete ideas on how to move agriculture forward. They're ideas that have come from farmers. They are ideas that have come from organizations like the Federation of Agriculture and Food First NL. And I was really happy to see those industry leaders stepping up this morning saying, yeah, we're prepared to be part of the solution. But the time for consultation and more talk is over. We need leadership, we need a plan, we need a real focus on the economy so that more jobs can ultimately be created by entrepreneurs in various sectors of the province. And government does have a role to play. What's desperately needed and what's desperately lacking right now is real leadership with a vision and a plan. And there was no evidence this morning that anything is changing anytime soon with this current administration.
Order, please. Order.